Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, 75a of Maseches Kiddushin, and we are starting 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Second word on the line, the word Tanya. So the Gemara says, Tanya, we're learning a brisa. V'chein Rabbi Elazar Omer. Rabbi Elazar said, additionally, Kusi lo yisa kusis. A kusi may not marry a kusis. A kusi is this group, kusim, as we've discussed, are this group of people that converted during the days of Shlomo HaMelech. Their conversion is questionable. Our Gemara is going to go into in further detail. In general, the first Mishnah had said that they cannot marry into Kahal. They cannot marry regular Jews of regular status. And now Rabbi Elazar is saying they can't even marry each other. A kusi cannot marry a kusis. A male cannot marry a female. My taima, what is the reason? Rabbi Yosef said, Asuhu keger la'achar asara daros. Because we give them the status of a convert after 10 generations. Meaning, Ditanya, we're learning a brisa, ger, a convert ad asara daros mutter b'mamzeres, mikan va'elef asr b'mamzeres. Up till 10 generations, a convert can marry a mamzeres. After that, they may not marry a mamzeres. And some say it's okay until we forget that they came from Gentile lineage. So this is going in the opinion, we had a machlokes, a dispute about this, whether a convert can marry a mamzeres at all, but within the opinion that a convert could marry a mamzeres, so up till 10 generations, they could continue to do so. The first opinion says, meaning, I believe we'd be talking about as long as both the father and the mother are converts, so then the child, the son, still has that status of a convert, and even though when he was born, his mother was completely Jewish, but he still has that status in that he would still be allowed to marry a mamzeres, and this would repeat for generation after generation if they continue to marry a male convert to a female convert. However, the first opinion says that after 10 generations, because they've been Jewish for so long, this family, people will forget that they really descend from converts, and therefore if they marry a mamzeres, so then people will think that a regular non-convert is allowed to marry a mamzeres. So after 10 generations, they cannot marry mamzeres. And then the second opinion says, Yesh Omrim, that no, they can continue to do so even after 10 generations, as long as we remember, as long as we know that they are converts, that they come from Gentile lineage originally, so then we're not concerned about such a mix-up that people will think that a non-convert, a non-ger can marry a mamzeres. So it's not until we lose, I guess obviously somebody knows here, but if the general public doesn't know anymore that they come from converts, at that point, I guess that could be earlier, it could be later. At that point, they become forbidden to marry mamzeres. So the Gemara is saying that that's the idea, suggesting that's the idea behind Rabbi Elazar's opinion here too. Rabbi Elazar said a kusi can't marry a kusis, and the concern is that they converted so long ago, whatever status their conversion had, but it was so long ago, and people will forget that they're a kusi or kusis, and then they go and they marry another kusi or kusis. People think it's okay for a regular Jew to marry a kusi or a kusis. That's the suggestion. So the Gemara says, and that would be why it's forbidden for them to marry. Says the Gemara, Amar le Abaye, Abaye said to him, Midami, is that really comparable? Can you compare the case of a kusi marrying a kusis to the case of a convert, 10th generation convert marrying a regular Jew? Hasam ger yashin umamzeres chadasha. Sorry, where a ger is marrying a mamzeres. So he says there, the ger is old, meaning the conversion, like we said, was 10 generations ago. And the mamzeres is a current thing. This woman is a mamzeres now. So there we're concerned that there's going to be a mix-up, meaning everybody knows she's a mamzeres. Not everyone knows that this convert is a convert or a descendant of converts. So there, people might think if he marries the mamzeres that he's a regular Jew, and a regular Jew is allowed to marry a mamzeres. But a regular born Jew, I should say. And they think that a born Jew is allowed to marry a mamzeres. So therefore, that's where we have such a concern, and we say that after 10 generations, or after it's forgotten their lineage, a convert, somebody who comes from the lineage of converts, cannot marry a mamzeres. But over here, right, so Amri over there, they'll say, Bar Yisraelu, Dikadas mamzeres. They're going to think it's a regular born Jew who's marrying a mamzeres. Bar Hacha, but over here, Idi ve'idi ki adadinenu. Both the man and the woman are kusis. They're descendants of kusim. So what's our concern? Is our concern that they that people will lose track of where they came from? So then there's no mix-up. The issue is that people might think that a regular Jew is marrying a kusis. But if you lose track of where they came from, then it's going to be a regular Jew marrying a regular Jew. What's the concern? And if people know where they come from, so then they know it's a kusi marrying a kusis. So what would be the concern over here? That doesn't seem to follow the same logic, and therefore that can't be the explanation for why a kusi can't marry a kusis. Ella, so rather, ki asar Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Elazar. So when Rav Dimi came, he said, ki asar Rav Dimi amar, when Rav Dimi came, he said, Rabbi Elazar savar lak Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yishmael savar lak Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. So again, Rabbi Elazar is the one who said this halacha, that a kusi can't marry a kusis. Why did he say that? Says the Gemara, says Rav Dimi, says because he holds like Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. Why is this? So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Elazar savar lak Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael, de Amar, who says, kusim geirei arayosim. That the kusim, this group of people, they are lion converts. Meaning, this is part of their complicated history, is that Rabbi Yishmael says they didn't really convert. They were forced to convert. They were afraid of being attacked by lions, and that's why they converted. But it wasn't really a good conversion. So really, they're not, they didn't have a proper acceptance of mitzvos for a proper conversion, and they're not really Jewish, and therefore, they're not Jewish, and so it's like non-Jews marrying a non-Jewish man. If a kusi would marry a Yisraelis, it's like it's an intermarriage. It's a non-Jew marrying a Jew. And additionally, Rabbi Yishmael savar lak Rabbi Akiva. Additionally, Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. De Amar oved kochavim ve'eved haba bas Yisrael havla mamzer, who holds that if a non-Jew has relations with the Jew, the Jewish girl, the child is a mamzer. So this is a unique position, but this is the position of Rabbi Akiva, that a Gentile who has a child from a Jewish woman, that child is a mamzer. How come? So Rashi learns that there's a lav, a negative prohibition for a non-Jew to marry a Jew, for the Jewess, the Jewish girl to marry a non-Jew. It would fall under losis chatin bam. It really was said about the 7 nations of Canaan, but Rashi understands that this position extends it to other nations, any non-Jew. There's a negative prohibition for a Jew to have relations with them, to marry them, and therefore, Rabbi Akiva also holds yesh mamzer mechai ve'lavin, that the product of a relationship, even when it's just a lav, a regular negative prohibition, it's not kares, it's not misa b'dei shamayim or misa b'beistin, even a prohibition that one doesn't get killed for, doesn't get kares. Rabbi Akiva holds the product of that relation, as long as it's prohibited as a lav, as a negative prohibition, is a mamzer. So, so here we have that a kusi is first of all really not Jewish, because it's Geri Arayos. It was a forced conversion. It's not a good conversion. And B, if a kusi were to marry a Yisraelis, a regular Jewish girl, then the child would be a mamzer. And that's the basis for Rabbi Elazar holding that a kusi cannot marry a kusis. So what's the concern still? What does this have to do with it? So Rashi says, because really, any of these, the kusi or the kusis, really is a suffix mamzer. Really might be a mamzer, because it depends who the parents were. So each one of them could have come from a Jewish woman who married a Kusi, and therefore the child would be a mamzer, and the other one would be a regular Kusi. So this is still needs further explanation. But for now, let's just pause and consider this. So what are we worried about? So we have a Kusi and a Kusis. Who are their parents? So it could be their parents are a Kusi, a male Kusi, who married a Yisraelis, a Jewish woman, which means that the child is a mamzer. So one of them, they could both be mamzerim, Jewish mamzerim, if the mother was a Jew, but the child would be a mamzer, in this, according to this opinion. They could both be Kusim, they could both be Gentiles, if that wasn't the case, if the parents were both Kusim. So we have a concern, maybe one is a mamzer and one is a Kusi. And that would be bad, because the mamzeres is Jewish and can't marry the Kusi. So that's the concern, that maybe one of them is Jewish, a mamzer, and one of them is not. The problem that still needs explanation here, though, is who cares if it's a mamzer or not? Even if it wasn't a mamzer, we should have the same concern. Maybe one of them is a Jew, even if they're not a mamzer. Maybe the mother was Jewish. I mean, why do we need that? He holds like Rabbi Akiva, who holds that if the non-Jew marries a Jew, the child is a mamzer. Even if you don't hold that, if the non-Jew marries a Jew, you say the child's not a mamzer, but the child's Jewish. So we should have the same concern. Maybe one of them is a Kusi married a Jewish woman, the child's Jewish, and maybe one of them is not that. Maybe one of them is a regular Kusi, and that should be the concern, a Jew marrying a non-Jew. Why is it important that this is within the opinion that the child would be a mamzer? So this is actually the question that Tosfos asks on Rashi, and Tosfos has a suggestion that it's novel, but Tosfos suggests that, at least according to Rashi, what we would have to say is that if you held that the child was not a mamzer, but rather was kosher, so then we would say that the child is not Jewish, even though the mother's Jewish. But we would go after the puzzle. We would follow like we talked about earlier in the chapter, you follow the puzzle, you follow the more disqualified one. And so, in this case, this opinion we're suggesting, I guess, would hold that if the father's not Jewish and the mother's Jewish, the child would be, if you don't hold the child's a mamzer, rather the child is kosher, but the child wouldn't be Jewish. But if you hold the child as a mamzer, if you hold like Rabbi Akiva, the product is a mamzer, so that would be the psul, and then we would actually, in that opinion, we would say the child is Jewish, but the child is a mamzer. So in a certain sense, it ends up being more of a problem here if the child is a mamzer, because then the child is Jewish, and then that child cannot marry a kusi, because it's a Jewish child marrying a kusi, as opposed to the opinion that the child is not a mamzer. So then we would follow the father. Again, this isn't the halacha, but this is at this point suggesting Tosfos' understanding of Rashi, understanding this step of the Gemara, that the child would have been not Jewish, and then we don't have a problem because it's a kusi marrying a kusis. They're both not Jewish, and we don't have to worry. So specifically, in the opinion the child's a mamzer, that's where the child will be Jewish, but a mamzer, and that's where we have a concern that the mamzer is marrying a kusis. Okay, so that's the Gemara's suggestion. Maybe that's why Rabbi Elazar said that a kusi can't marry a kusis, because maybe really one of them is Jewish, is a mamzer, and the other one is a kusis, and they shall not marry each other. Ask the Gemara, but that can't be. Umi sabar la Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Akiva. Could Rabbi Shmuel really hold like Rabbi Akiva that if a non-Jew marries a Jew, the child is a mamzer? V'ham Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yishmael, but Rabbi Yochanan said the name of Rabbi Yishmael, minayin lo b'tkachavim ve'evet sheba kahenes, ve'al-levia ve'al-bas Yisrael shepasula. How do we know that if a non-Jew, or an Eved, or a slave, has relations with either the daughter of a Kohen, the daughter of a Levi, or the daughter of a Yisrael, shepasula, they disqualify her from being able to marry a Kohen. How do we know that? Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "Ubas Kohen kisiya almana grusha v'zera enla." The daughter of a Kohen, if she becomes a widow or she gets divorced and she has no children, so she can go back to eating truma, right? So the daughter of a Kohen could eat truma, but if she marries a Yisrael, she has to stop eating truma. If her husband dies or divorces her, if she has no children, she goes back to her father's house, so to speak, that she can continue to eat truma. That's what the pasuk says. But we infer, Misha yeshla almanos v'gerushin. Only one who it's shayach, it's relevant to talk about the possibility of being widowed or being divorced. That's who could go back to eating truma and isn't disqualified. As opposed to if this woman had relations, if this daughter of a Kohen, Levi or Yisrael, had relations with with somebody who there's no Kiddushin, there's no marriage, there's no widowing or divorce because there's no marriage in the first place because Kiddushin doesn't take effect, they would not be able to go back to eating truma and they would not be able to marry a Kohen. Again, eating truma is only relevant for the daughter of a Kohen, but marrying a Kohen is relevant for the daughter of a Kohen Levi Yisrael. Again, it's not relevant by a grusha. A grusha, a divorcee, cannot marry a Kohen. But for Almana, if she became widowed, she could go back to, she could marry a Kohen still. But the Gemara is saying only one who is only one who the relationship they had the possibility of being widowed or being divorced, as opposed to if the relationship was with someone who there's no Kiddushin, like a non-Jew, so then that would disqualify this woman from, if she was daughter of a Kohen, for being truma, and if not, or even if not, either way, whoever she came from marrying a Kohen in the future. So that's a statement of Rabbi Yishmael. So what do we see from here? Says the Gemara, Ve'isaka daitach savar lak Rabbi Akiva. And if you want to suggest that Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva, that if a non-Jew has relations with a Jewish woman, the child is a mamzer, hashta mamzer have. Here, if the relationship produces a mamzer, mifsal b'biyasmi bayi, do you need to even tell me that she becomes disqualified from having relations with this non-Jew? That is obvious. We know that such a relationship would disqualify any illicit relationship that produces a mamzer would certainly disqualify her from kahuna. So from the fact that Rabbi Yishmael had to produce this pasuk to teach me that if a woman has relations with a non-Jew, she becomes disqualified from eating truma or marrying a Kohen, clearly he doesn't hold that the product of that relationship is a mamzer, because otherwise you don't need this pasuk. Just from the fact that the product is a mamzer, that would tell me that she becomes disqualified from kahuna. So it seems that Rabbi Yishmael does not hold like Rabbi Akiva. So back to the drawing board somewhat. We were trying to figure out why Rabbi Lazar said that a kusi who marries a kusis, that they're not allowed to marry each other. A kusi may not marry a kusis. We suggested because maybe one of them is a mamzer but Jewish and one of them is not. But that depended on Rabbi Lazar holding like Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yishmael holding like Rabbi Akiva. But we know Rabbi Yishmael doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. So rather, says the Gemara, El Rabbi Lazar savar like Rabbi Yishmael, de amar kusim geri arayos. It could be that Rabbi Lazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael and continues to maintain that the kusim are not Jewish. They are geri arayos. They converted by force. They were afraid of lions or out of fear. V'savar like Rabbi Akiva. And not that Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva, but maybe Rabbi Lazar holds like Rabbi Akiva. Da'amar kusim da'amar obed kochavim ve'eved abba basisra abba mamzer. We could still maintain the same idea. Just leave Rabbi Yishmael out of the picture in the second step. The way we said it before was Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael, because we need that for the idea that the kusim aren't Jewish, because they're geri arayos, they converted from lions. Previously we said, and Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. Gemara is now saying skip that step. Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael with regards to the status of the conversion of kusim, and Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Akiva with regards to that the product of a relationship between a kusia or a non-Jew and a Jewish woman would be a mamzer, and therefore we're concerned if a mamzer were to marry a kusi, that would be forbidden. The mamzer is Jewish and the kusis is not. But says the Gemara, Mi savar la Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Akiva. But could we really say that Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Akiva? V'ha'amar Rabbi Elazar. But Rabbi Elazar said the following: even though we have a machlokas, we have a dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel when it comes to tsaros, which we'll explain in a minute. Modim she'eng mamzer elo mimisha yisro isur erva v'anush kares. But they agree that the child will only be a mamzer if it's a case of an erva, of what we call arayos, the forbidden relations, and one that is chayav kares. So before we explain what Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and tsaros, what that was about, but the point that it's bringing is we have a statement to Rabbi Elazar saying that that everybody agrees that only the product of an Isser Erva, of Kares, something of a relationship that would be Chayiv Kares, that's where you have a Mamzer. But regular Lav, no. So clearly Rabbi Elazar does not hold like Rabbi Akiva that a regular Lav and a regular negative prohibition that's not Kares produces a Mamzer. What is this whole thing with Rabbi Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Tsaros? This gets us into the laws of Yibum. So we know that if a man dies without children, so then his wife falls to Yibum to the man's brother. And the brother has a mitzvah to either marry this woman or give her chalitza. Now, what happens if you have two brothers married to two sisters? So, not their own sisters, but you have two brothers, they're married to two sisters that they were not previously related to. So one of the brothers dies. So his sister, so his wife now falls to Yibum. The problem is that her sister is already married to the Yavam, to the brother, and the man's not allowed to marry two sisters. So he can't do Yibum, seemingly. He can't marry his brother's wife, because his brother's wife is his wife's sister. So here we have a dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says actually he could. It's an exception, just like in general we have an exception, you can't marry your brother's wife, but if she falls to Yibum, so you could. So Beis Shammai holds that a tsaras erva, the word tsaros means, is the word for a sister wife, a co-wife. So Beis Shammai holds that he would be allowed to marry his wife's sister, do Yibum to his wife's sister, and be married to two sisters, in this case. Beis Hillel says it is forbidden. And not only that, but she doesn't even need chalitza. There's no yibum. She can't do yibum, so you don't need chalitza either, and she goes and walks free to the shuk. You know, she goes out to the market, she can marry anyone already without yibum or chalitza. Now, let's say somebody did like Beis Shammai, and they went and they married the wife's sister. So, according to Beis Hillel, that's a chiyuv kares. And if they have a child, it would be a mamzer. Right? Beis Hillel is saying that the brother of the deceased cannot marry his brother's wife because it's his wife's sister. And if he does, he's marrying his wife's sister, that's chiyuv kares. If it's chiyuv kares, the child is a mamzer. So Beis Hillel would say, if you do like Beis Shammai, the child's a mamzer. But if you go in the other direction, so Beis Shammai holds you're supposed to do yibum in this case. You're supposed to do yibum, or you could do chalitza. But you can't just walk free to the shuk. You can't just go and she can't just go and marry somebody without chalitza. Beis Hillel says she doesn't need chalitza. So let's say somebody does like Beis Hillel, and she goes and she marries another man. So according to Beis Shammai, she needed chalitza. So there, though, it's not a chiyuv kares. For a yavama, a woman who's supposed to get yibum or chalitza, for her to marry to the shuk, for her to marry another man without yibum or chalitza, without getting chalitza first, it's a lav. It's a negative prohibition, but it's not kares, and therefore the child will not be a mamzer. So that's what Rabbi Elazar was saying, that they both agree that that it would only be a mamzer if it was the product of something that's potentially kares. But everybody would agree, even Beis Shammai, that there's no kares for her to marry without getting chalitza, and therefore the child will not be a mamzer. So that's where we see that Rabbi Elazar does not hold like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar holds that you don't have, that the product of chayve laving, of regular negative prohibitions, is not mamzer. So we need a new approach. So why is it that a kusi can't marry a kusis? So we're actually not going to get the full answer today, because it doesn't actually get to the answer until the next Amud. But we'll start to introduce it. So Eloki asa Ravin Amar Reb Chia bar Abba Amar Reb Yochanan. So when Ravin came, he said that Reb Chia bar Abba saying the name of Reb Yochanan, V'amrila, and some say Amar Reb Abba bar Zavda Amar Reb Chanina. Some say it's Reb Abba bar Zavda saying the name of Reb Chanina, V'amrila, and some say Amar Reb Yaakov bar Idi Amar Reb Yeshua ben Levi. That some say it was Reb Yaakov bar Idi in the name of Reb Yeshua ben Levi. Maybe they all said it, but this is how they break it down. Shalosh machlokos badavar. There's 3 opinions regarding kusim. Rabbi Shmuel savar kusim geri arayosein. Rabbi Shmuel holds the kusim are geri arayos. They converted under duress, fear of these lions. A. B. We know that Kohanim married into them. Says Rabbi Shmuel, the Kohanim shenitmu bahem. The Kohanim who intermarried into them, Kohanim psulim hayu. These were already disqualified Kohanim. They were chalalim. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayasu lahem miktsosam kohanei bamos. That they made from amongst them Kohanei bamos, Kohanim over their altars. So this Rashi explains to us. This is in Sefer Melachim, when the 10 Shvatim were sent into exile by Sancheriv. So with regards to the Kusim, it says they from amongst them were Kohanei Bamos. These Kohanim, the Gemara is interpreting that they intermarried with the Kusim. V'amar Rabba bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, mina kotsim sheba'am. When it says mikutzosam, we make a drasha. Mikutzosam means like from amongst them. We make a drasha and say mehakotsim, from the thorns of the nation, meaning they were psulim. They were disqualified kohanim. Umishum hachi paslenu, and that's why they are pasal. So the question the Gemara is trying to deal with is, why are you not allowed to marry a kusi? So Rabbi Shmuel holds they weren't proper gerim, and they were not proper converts, and that's why it's prohibited to marry them. I think the next part about the Kohanim that marry into them is more relevant for the next opinion. The next opinion says, for Rabbi Akiva Savar, this is the second opinion, Kusim Geirei Emesein. No, the Kusim were true converts. They really converted. The Kohanim Shnitbohem Kohanim Ksherim Hayu. And the Kohanim who intermarried with them, they were actually Ksherim. They were proper Kohanim. And Shneamar, as the pasuk says, Vayasulam Miktsosam Kohanei Bamos. And they were made from amongst them Kohanei Bamos, Kohanim over the altars. From the choicest, or Hakatzinim, the leaders, basically Rabbi Akiva holds that we don't say that Mikatsosam is teaching us they were the Kotsim, they were the thorns, rather they were the Bechim, they were the choicest, or some fit to the word, Katzinim is like the leaders. So so they were fine to marry. Ve'ela mipnei ma asrum. So then why were they forbidden to marry? Why are you not allowed to marry kusim? They were proper converts. Gemara says, mipnei shahayu miyavmim es ha'arusos upotrim es hanesuos. Because they had a very backwards understanding of the laws of Yibum, they would do Yibum only if they were arusos, if they were betrothed. But if they were nesuos, once they were married, if the husband died without children, they would say that the wife does not need Yibum. And this is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Akiva holds that means that if there was a situation where they really needed Yibum or Chalitza, and they didn't get it, the woman didn't get it, and she went and married somewhere else, so that's olav, like we just said before, that's a negative prohibition. According to Rabbi Akiva, the olavim produce mamzerim, which means that they were producing mamzerim all over the place. Or whenever there was a married woman whose husband died without children, they wouldn't do Yibum or Chalitza. She could go get married to another man, and according to Rabbi Akiva, the child's a mamzer, so the kusim would have been full of mamzerim. My Darshi, why did they think this? What drasha, what interpretation of the pasuk did they have? Because the pasuk says, Lo siya eshes hameis hachutza li'ish zar. It says with regards to a man who dies without children, his wife should not be outside to a foreign man. Rather, they should do Yibum or Chalitza. So, hach de yasva chutza, one who sits outside, he lo siya li'ish zar. They interpreted when it says lo siya eshes hameis hachutza means if the wife of the deceased is outside, meaning they're just betrothed, she's not yet nisun, she's not yet in, she cannot be li'ish zar. She cannot be to a foreigner. That's only if they're only betrothed, if there's only eris in it. That's where you need even machalitza. Aval hach. But this woman who's married, de lo yasva chutza, who doesn't sit outside, she's in, she's married. Tia li'ish zar, she should be allowed to marry a foreign man without Yibum or Chalitza. Rabbi Akiva l'taimei, this would be Rabbi Akiva, according to his reasoning, to Amar, who says, Yesh mamzer mechai be'lavin. That you can have a mamzer from chai be'lavin, meaning, because their drasha was wrong. This whole thing is wrong, it's a misread. And therefore, they were allowing married women who needed Chalitza to marry without Chalitza. And that is allowed, that's a negative prohibition in the Torah. Rabbi Akiva holds such people, their child is a mamzer. So according to Rabbi Akiva, there's lots of mamzerim amongst the kusim, and that's why you cannot marry a kusi. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, the reason is because they didn't have a proper conversion. In addition to that, you had Kohanim who were disqualified marrying into them. I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes, because they were marrying non-Jews anyways. And Rabbi Akiva held the reason why you can't marry kusim, they were good converts. But the problem is they had this misinterpretation of the laws of Yibum that would produce many mamzerim, so there's a concern about mamzerim amongst the kusim. And the third opinion is going to be Rabbi Elazar, and that we're going to say for next time, and that's going to help us understand Rabbi Elazar's opinion that we started with, that a kusi should not marry a kusis.